Hello, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm on a mission to help you be a fit and healthy athlete from the inside out. And today we are going to talk about gut health, dysbiosis, leaky gut, all things that are going to make an impact on your aging process, even if you are an athlete.
Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey, are you an aging athlete? Are you over 40 and struggling to get your desired results? I understand your frustrations. If you're like me, you're trying to get your running back or your cycling back or whatever sport you love to do, and you just can't figure out what's missing in your performance gains. How is your training and fueling program working for you? That's what I do. I personalize your nutrition and health program for you based on a bunch of different things. We collect data, collect clues from nutritional therapy assessment, from a food log with symptoms. Look at your genetics. If you've done something as DNA Fit, look at blood chemistry panels. Let's look at functional lab tests as a Vibrant Wellness wheat zoomer to test if you have leaky gut and sensitivity to wheat, peptides in foods. Look at food sensitivity labs. And Dutch tests, look at your hormones. So we look at all these hidden internal sources of chronic stress that may be impacting your ability to burn fat, improve performance, and longevity. So if you want to talk about how we can personalize your fueling, training, and performance plan, let me know. Set up a discovery call. Head to my website, debbiepotts.net, and reach out. Set up a call and we can chat about how I can help you be the best version of yourself so you can stop blaming the aging process and instead change your mindset that you're embracing the change, that we train differently in our 40s and up versus what you did when you're 20, 30-year-old. We need to adjust how we eat, when we eat, why and how, but also match our nutrition with our exercise program and add some more health building lifestyle habits into our day. I call this all the holistic method comprehensive coaching program, where I work on individualizing clients' nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, sleep, movement, time outside, digestion and gut health, hydration, and my favorite, happiness, play, and laughter. So if you want to know more how you can be your best self, live your best life, and perform your best, head to debbiepotts.net, schedule a discovery call with me, and we can get started on your new health building journey. You can be that amazing athlete and stop blaming the aging process. All right, today's guest is Dr. Nick Bitz. He's a naturopathic physician that specializes in Ayurvedic medicine, which I am fascinated by. He is a leading voice in the natural products industry and is currently serving as Senior VP of Product Development in the Neurohacker Collective group. And his area of expertise are not only nootropics, but anti-aging, biohacking, herbology, nutrition, and dietary supplements. But today, we are focusing on gut health, dysbiosis, leaky gut, inflammation, gut-brain connection, and more. So we have to do a part 2 because I kind of got into learning more about Ayurvedic medicine. So let me know what your questions are so we can have Dr. Nick back on the show. So give me some comments after you listen. Enjoy the show. Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm up on the hilltop, our upper yard in my glass house. So if you're watching the video, I've got sun coming in the side here. So I'm trying to be able to see the screen. I wanted to talk to you about our guest today. I wanted someone to come back on the show talking about longevity a lot lately and how we can improve it. So I reached out to the doctors at Neurohacker Collective products. They have a lot of research on how to improve the aging process. So we're going to talk about gut health, the gut-brain connection, talk about dysbiosis, and also I want to dive into zombie cells and then what are prebiotics and probiotics and postbiotics. So I got Dr. Nick Bitz to come on the show to talk about all things healthy from the inside out. And he is a naturopathic physician who specializes in Ayurvedic medicine, he's a leading voice in the natural product industry and currently serves as Senior VP of Product Development at Neurohacker Collective. And his area of expertise is nootropics, anti-aging medicine, biohacking, herbology, nutrition, and dietary supplements. So perfect person to talk about how we can improve the aging process with our nutrition, supplementing where we need to, when, why, and how, and our lifestyle habits. We've been talking about how to improve the aging process, your longevity markers with exercise, as I do with Pinoy metabolic testing, measuring your VO2 max. Also with the aging athlete and female athlete specifically, talking a lot lately about how we can improve our insulin sensitivity with the way we exercise, and then timing our nutrition in and around workouts to improve our lipid uptake and lipid removal, fat, and also working on exercise as a tool, strength training, HIIT training, sit training, plyometrics to improve our ability to shuttle glucose into the muscle cell to be used as fuel, and then keeping our blood levels of glucose more in homeostasis. It is a issue as us female athletes age and our hormones get lower, and postmenopausal, we have that lower level of estrogen that we really want to work on how we train, how we fuel, but more not how with you fuel with what you're eating, but when you're eating, and how to optimize your exercise and nutrition to improve your performance in daily life. And as I continue to talk about how we are showing up to life as our future self. So whatever you're doing now, instead of just focusing narrow-minded of just this season of races and events, or maybe this is your off season right now, thinking of next year, but let's start thinking about taking action, taking ownership for our health so we are living our best life when we are 80, 90 years old. So it's really important, I think, as athletes, as I kind of change the name of the show to be fit and healthy from the inside out. And it's not just saying low carb, I think is misleading for a lot of people. It doesn't mean zero carb. It means real food and finding what protein goals you have, what sources of carbohydrates, berries, potatoes, when to have those as an athlete is different than someone's more metabolically challenged with metabolic disease. So as a fit and active individual, we want to learn how to fuel, train, and perform our best in everyday life and our sports and our future self, but learning how to eat properly for your metabolic type and for the exercise you are doing. As I've been talking about the female athlete doing, and I think men too, we need to do less volume and more quality workout sessions, which doesn't mean doing the same thing every day. I noticed that at the gym, I just joined Choose Fitness here by my house. And it's amazing watching people when I go in there weekdays to lift weights and do my workout, how many people are doing the same thing over and over again. I see them over on the cardio machines, and some people do sprints, which is great, but they're doing them every day. And so we really want to individualize our training program for the week, by the month, by the quarter, seasonal, and our nutrition will change a little bit as well as for the premenopausal female athlete, matching their nutrition, exercise, and if they do some fasting, match it based on your cycle. So much to go into because it's so personalized. But today I really want to go into longevity and how we can improve our gut health, be healthy from the inside out, to improve the aging cells and talk about what are zombie cells and all that. So let's bring on Dr. Nick to go into strategies to be fit and healthy from the inside out. All right. I've got Dr. Nick on the show, not too far from me. Inside, I'm kind of indoor, outdoor for watching the video. How are you today?
Good morning. I am fantastic. It is still summer, even though it's fall here in Southern California.
I know.
It's a beautiful day.
Yeah, that's why I had to be outside of my glass house. I moved from Seattle down here to live in the outdoors and thrive every day year round. And I know we're kind of fortunate that the best weather of the year is actually in October down here. So everywhere else gets fall, we get summer starting in September, October. So I wanted to bring you on the show. As I said in my intro, I'm all about optimizing aging process and training and fueling and doing whatever we can now as middle-aged athletes. We're aging, but I look at how do I want to show up to life when I'm 80, 90. I watched my dad sadly pass away last year. I see my mom and all of her friends when I go visit them in Palm Desert, limping around. And it really makes me fired up to talk about, all right, guys, we are so in charge of our health and the direction we take and figure out what path to go on now at age, say, at 50 to improve your future self. So what makes you kind of focus on aging and with your background and naturopathic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and the Neurohacker Collective, and being in your industry, what do you think of the importance of longevity?
I have so many comments. You just opened 7 different boxes. I will comment, one thing that I've come back to over and over, I think in order to be healthy in the modern world, you really have to live an exceptional life.
Yeah.
Can't do what everybody else is doing. And people often fall into that trap. You start thinking like your friends, eating like your friends, consuming the same media as your family, and on and on and on. And so everybody ends up just kind of recessing to the mean, if you will, and becoming kind of one. And so in order to be healthy, you have to live an exceptional life. You have to do things that are different. You have to do things on a daily, consistent basis. In order to be proactive in your health. You just can't assume that your health status is always going to be what it was in the 20s or 30s, or, when you become older, you're going to wish that you were doing these things when you were 20, 30, 40. And so being proactive in your self-care is the most critically important thing for everybody across the board. And there's a lot of misinformation. I think a lot of people, they don't really know what to do. I think as a biohacker, as a physician, as a health enthusiast, I've personally tried it all. And now I take a much more simplistic approach, a much more intuitive approach. I'm not so rigid in my what I need to do, but I'm making sure that my daily rhythms are anchored in these kind of exceptional protocols that I believe are creating health now and that are going to serve me well into my old age.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying more personalized approach, taking ownership of our health and figuring out what that is for me. So how do you create a personalized program for someone? What are ways to get started on figuring out, okay, what should I do? So many options.
There are so many options. I mean, in part, you need to use your body as a laboratory and just figure out what works for you, because there is no one protocol. There is no one diet. I am a naturopathic physician by training. My specialty is in Ayurvedic medicine. And what I love about Ayurveda is that it personalizes the treatment regimens, and it creates these very individualistic protocols for people. And so as an example, salad, and it's widely consumed. People are like, oh, eat more salad. It's quote unquote healthy. It really depends on your body type. There are certain body types that can thrive on that. There are certain body types that absolutely should not eat salad, as an example. And so really understanding yourself is the first step, I think, to creating a personalized protocol. And you can do that any number of ways. I, of course, come at it from the Ayurvedic perspective. And I try to work with my patients and just even personally as well. I work with body types. And so based upon the energetics of a body type, I'm trying to balance your individual body type through diet, botanicals, and all the inputs that we all come across on a daily basis.
So Is that kind of what is Ayurvedic medicine? Could you maybe explain? You kind of said it, I guess, right now, just the energetics and body typing. Is that what the definition is? And what is it with naturopathic medicine? What would you describe it as?
Yeah, good question. And it's good to define it first before we start talking about it. Ayurveda is the oldest form of medicine in the world. So it's been around for 5,000 years. It really is considered the mother of all medicine. So traditional Chinese medicine comes from it. And even, traditional or conventional allopathic medicine, which we practice in the United States, a lot of that has roots in Ayurveda. So it's alive and well, even presently. But Ayurveda really means two things. It's two different words, Ayu and Veda. Ayu means life and Veda means science. And so Ayurveda is the science of life. It is kind of the sister science of yoga. They really work hand in hand. And so Ayurveda is all about taking care of the body, and yoga is all about taking care of the spirit. But they work together to create this holistic lifestyle, if you will. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. It really teaches you how to live your life during all phases, and ultimately how to gain enlightenment, however you want to define that. And that should be the goal for most of us in life. And so Ayurveda is really creating the foundation of that. And Ayurveda is neat because it's a whole world or universe philosophy. It talks about how everything in the universe started and how that trickles down into the human body. And it really breaks everything down into energetics. And so it is a naturalistic form of medicine, a naturalistic philosophy, in that it looks at everything according to the 5 elements. And so there are 5 elements that compose everything in the universe. There is space, there's air that fills that space. There's fire, there's water, and there's earth. And so all of those principles move from subtle to very dense. And so we as humans are a mixture of those 5 elements. And so obviously, if you are composed of, let's say, the space and the air elements predominantly, you then are lacking those other 3 elements. You're lacking the water, the fire, and the earth. And so everything that you do should be to create more fire, water, and earth. And so I am a Vata body type. I have that predominance of the air and the space elements. So everything that I do has those other 3 elements in it. And so it's all about creating balance in the body. If I'm consuming leafy greens, if you look at a leafy green, what is it, right? It's this plant that's blowing out in space. It really is the essence of air and space. It takes on those energetic imprints, if you will, but it's lacking water, it's lacking fire, it's lacking earth, right? So for me personally, as a Vata body type, plants such as leafy greens are creating imbalance in my body type because they're adding the 2 elements that I already have a lot of, right? So I need to do everything besides leafy greens in my diet, as an example. So that's what I really like. I like that Ayurveda starts with the energetics of the body, and then it matches that with your diet and with everything else in your lifestyle to make sure that you're creating balance. And so if you do, in theory, the idea is that you're going to live a long, healthy life according to Ayurveda. And Ayurveda thinks that humans should live to 120 easily. Yeah. And basically we don't, because we are living against what we intuitively know to be wise and to be healthy. And so all diseases start in the mind, according to Ayurveda. But again, there are ways that you can grab a hold of your health status, be in control of your health, according to these principles.
So is Ayurveda a person that started this? You said, according to Ayurveda, is it someone?
Yeah, so it's the accumulation of knowledge over time, and so it's not any one person. There are a collection of books. They're called the Vedas that really encapsulate all of this knowledge that we've accrued over thousands of years, and people have added to it. It still is a living document, but it's really based upon these universal laws that these saints and sages and meditators and gurus and physicians and everybody had input from the start. And so I look upon it as kind of like the oldest living document, the Vedas.
Yeah. And it keeps being updated.
Yeah, it's
added
really
to.
profound. It's really profound. So it's very esoteric. It's very old, and that can turn a lot of people off. But I think that it can be simplified and applied in the modern world. And so I think that's an important point. If you can understand these concepts with our modern brains and utilize them on a day-to-day basis, you can be healthy.
Well, that's why I love, even in nutritional therapy practitioners and FDM practitioners, we learn about metabolic typing diet, and that, if you ever did that intake form, there's the crazy questions, of your eyes and your jaw, and really looking at how you, the person, is built, and looking at all your structures, not just how do you feel when you eat this food. And so really looking at, I know it seems like it's somewhat based on Ayurvedic medicine, I'm not sure, but is just how individualized what to eat. And that's why I keep talking about, it's not just one size fits all. Everyone needs to do carnivore or keto. And when is it appropriate to do more of a strict elimination diet? But what is the best food plan for you that I think everyone agrees on? It's real food. And whatever the macronutrient ratios are, what that source of food is just get rid of the packaged food and the food with barcode and bags. As Dr. Ben Bigben, I heard him saying, just get rid of the bags and boxes of food. See food from nature, then figure out how to make a meal from that.
Yep. And again, that's just doing that one small little trick can have profound implications for your health. And so you don't need to get too heady. And I think, we know, you probably know the term orthorexia, which is this idea that people strive too hard to achieve health, and it can create imbalance in their life. And so it's about having that flexibility and having that intuition, listening to your body, knowing what's right, avoiding things that are uber processed, and getting back to basics, going to the farmer's market, eating with the seasons, cooking for yourself at home, using clean ingredients, using clean oils, doing more plant-based, doing judicious amounts of protein. But diversity is the key. And so when you get into gut health, which is an area that I'm absolutely enamored with right now, you find that it's all about diversity of gut microbiome. And that is the key to health and longevity in a lot of ways. And so the only way to achieve that is by eating a wide, varied diet. If you're consuming just meat, rice, and broccoli on a daily basis, you're not giving your body the variety that it needs from a nutrient standpoint, nor are you feeding all of these bacteria. A lot of the bacteria, when they don't get certain nutrients, they starve and they go away. And so you're eliminating your microbiome. You're starting with these thousands of microbe species, hopefully, when you start as a baby, and ultimately we weed them down, and everybody becomes very singular in their microbiome profile as we age, which is a defining feature. We now know that dysbiosis in the microbiome is one of the hallmarks of aging. So it really drives the aging process. So the microbiome intimately related to food, but diversity is really the key.
And that's what I learned from Paul Chek's program. I did his holistic lifestyle coach program 10 years ago. And I always bring back the 4-day rotation diet, no matter what all these different diets out there and what people are saying, no vegetables, plant-based, plants are toxins, animal-based, but it's looking at how does that food make you feel? And then does it make you feel full and satisfied and energized? And that's metabolic typing diet check record sheet we use, but it comes back to that. Don't eat the same food every 4 days, have variety, which I think when we're talking about our podcast is more being fit and healthy athlete. The athlete is doing exercise, but I would say, you need variation in your workouts. You need variation in your food, and just everything we do, I say, ends up being the Goldilocks effect. Not too much of this, not too much of that, just that right amount, and then mix it up, vary everything to create optimal results.
Absolutely. And I will say that there is a time and place for simplifying and doing a singular diet. And one of the things that I recommend, again, that comes from the Ayurvedic tradition is what's called the mono diet. And so it's eating one meal that's super balanced over the course of several days or weeks, just to give your body a break. And so it's almost the equivalent of a fast. You're not necessarily consuming less calories. That's not the goal. It's just to simplify, make sure that you are giving the body a chance to heal itself, press reset. The meal that they recommend, it's called khichdi. Khichdi, funny name, but khichdi is almost like the macaroni and cheese meal of India. It's like incredibly homey and like comforting, and it's full of like rice and ghee and vegetables and spice, and it's just so like nourishing. I mean, you just crave it after a while. It's one of my favorite meals, but they recommend consuming that for at least 3 days at a time, just to give your body that reset moment. And so I often will recommend that, or of course, doing a fast of sorts. I think having that reset moment is critically important.
Yeah. So I want to touch back on that. We're talking about gut health and the right balance of good bacteria to outnumber the bad bacteria. So dysbiosis, what is your definition of a bad, unhealthy gut? What would that?
Yeah.
How would you know?
It's hard to say what precisely constitutes an unhealthy gut. I think we all know when our gut is feeling balanced. And I think when you get to the most basic level, like what's the greatest indicator of gut health? I think it's twofold. First and foremost, it's looking at your bowel movements. And I know a lot of people don't like talking about this or hearing it, but it's important to talk about these things because it's a foundation of health. And I think, everybody should strive to have 1 to 2 bowel movements per day. Anything less, anything more can create imbalance. You should aim to have them at the same time every day. They should be easy to pass, not too smelly. They should be light brown, the consistency of a ripe banana. And so that's what you should strive for. And if you have that on a daily basis, you are not dysbiotic. You are eubiotic. You are in a healthy state. And so the bowel movements are easily the greatest indicator of where you are on a day-to-day basis from a gut health perspective. I'll also add that from an Ayurvedic perspective, they look at digestive fire. So there's a Sanskrit word called Agni, which is the god of fire. And that is the most critical element of the body, of health. And all of the tissues have Agni. Of course, your digestive system has Agni. And so they're interested in assessing Agni. What is your fire? What is the brightness of your digestive fire? When you wake up in the morning, are you hungry? Are you just ready to eat? Are you feeling awake? Are you hungry before lunch? Are you hungry before dinner? Do you break down meals effectively without any gas, bloating, indigestion? So when you have strong digestive fire, you have lightness in the belly. And that really is a good indicator as well. There's ways that you can hone in there and create health just by focusing on bowel movements and digestive fire. But you can measure what's happening in the gut as well. We do use stool testing clinically. That gives you a good snapshot about what's happening in the belly or the intestinal tract. There's ways you can focus on one organism or the community of organisms to look at them, but there is no one fingerprint of the microbiome that's considered healthy. And so you might be very healthy. I might be very healthy. We could have very different microbiome fingerprints, as it were. And so from a science standpoint, we don't really know what constitutes a healthy picture within the gut, which is interesting. I mean, I think we're starting to tease that apart more and more. And there's ways that you can get in there and improve the microbiome. But dysbiosis, I would say overall, you're dysbiotic when you start to have symptoms, when your microbiome isn't serving you in a healthy way, when it's creating inflammatory compounds, and you're starting to have these inflammatory symptoms. And that can show up any number of ways in the body. And so that is, I would think, at the most elemental, fundamental way, that is how we define dysbiosis.
So what are some common symptoms of dysbiosis that maybe for an athlete might feel when they're working out, or more post-workout, they might feel more inflamed and have more joint pain and just sluggish during their workouts? Would you find any trends there, patterns?
Yeah, I mean, I at its most basic level is this idea of inflammation, and it's systemic, and so that can show up, in the brain as brain fog, as an example. Mm-hmm. That can show up in the joints. as kind of a lingering, joint discomfort. That can show up obviously in the muscles. If you have anabolic resistance where you're just not getting the gains that you want, it can show up any number of ways. I mean, that we're now learning that the gut is related to every organ in the body. There's a lot of attention right now on the gut-brain axis, which is endlessly fascinating. And we can talk about that on a whole nother podcast. And I love that because we know that those two are intimately related, and your mental state is dependent on your digestive capacity as it is. So it really depends, and you do see things start to appear on the skin too. If you're dysbiotic, it tends to spill over into the skin and you start getting skin rashes and acne and this. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, from a naturopathic perspective, we always say, when in doubt, treat the gut. So no matter what's happening on a broad level within the human body, always just start with the gut. And so you can't be well unless you have a balanced gut overall.
So when we have dysbiosis, imbalance of good to bad bacteria, so the bad guys are ruling over the good guys, and then that creates or leads to chronic inflammation, brain fog, all these different things we're talking about. But is that because of leaky gut? So those bad bacteria and endotoxins, so toxic guys are getting out through the gates because the gates are broken down. And so then they're entering into the rest of the body. So then we have all these other weird symptoms. They're like, how does that have to do with my gut? Is what people would probably feel like. All right, how's this joint pain related to bad bacteria in my gut?
Yeah. And so it certainly can be due to leaky gut. I think that a large subset of the population actually has leaky gut, which is now a clinical diagnosis. It's no longer this woo-woo idea that's on the internet. It actually is a real phenomenon where you actually will break apart your intestinal cells and proteins or bacteria will sneak into the body. And so it is important to remember that the digestive tract is a hollow tube. And so it is hollow from the mouth all the way to the rectum. And that is considered the outside of the body. So it's not, I know it seems like the gut is inside of you, but that is considered the exterior world. That's not you. We know that there are trillions of bacteria and protozoa and fungi and viruses. They all live on the surface of the body within the GI tract. And so for things to sneak into the body, then they have to go through the walls of the intestine, or you have to break them down and absorb them through a cell. And then they go to the liver, and then they, you move them around systemically. But yes, a lot of people have what's called quote unquote leaky gut. But I would say perhaps a bigger issue would be the metabolic profile of your microgenome. So we know that the microbiome they're reliant on the foods that we eat, specifically carbohydrates, a little bit of protein, some fibers. They use those for foods, and then they create these metabolites. And there's a whole spectrum of metabolites that they produce. Short chain fatty acids are often talked about, butyrate, acetate, propionate. We're understanding how those are valuable in the body and how they work within the GI tract and how they work systemically as well. But you need to have the right profile of metabolites. And so there are certain metabolites that are not good, that create inflammation in the joints, as it were. And so we're just now, again, starting to tease that apart. I think that's kind of the next level. We've now really looked at the bacteria and what constitute the gut, but now we're looking at what do these bacteria produce and how does that impact the human body? And so I would say in the next 5 years or so, we're going to understand the metabolites a lot more. But I think that really drives a lot of these dysbiotic symptoms that people experience.
So definition of metabolites for people, if they're not sure what that is, and let's go into what is a pre and a probiotic and a postbiotic, because we keep hearing about short chain fatty acids a lot too, and butyrate, and that you could just people, and then we can get into fiber, not fiber, because that's a whole debate. The carnivore world, the animal-based, the plant-based. So let's start with metabolites and see where we get from there. But just give people a quick little definition if they're confused what we're talking about.
Yeah. So in short, a metabolite is anything that a bacterial cell in the gut produces from breaking down food. And so as an example, fiber should get down to the colon, and it actually ferments in the colon. All the bacteria are breaking it down, and the byproducts of that are feeding that microenvironment. And you're also absorbing a lot of those as well. They work locally on the cells, but you absorb them systemically. So they are the byproducts of fermentation, if you will. So they are really the end product of when you put something in your mouth, it gets into your colon, it ferments. The byproduct is that metabolite, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that's next level. We actually don't know a lot about that. We know quite a bit around the short chain fatty acids. But beyond that, I don't think we know a lot quite yet. And that's again, next level, which is really neat. But so when you're getting into some of what you can do to target gut health, you did mention the prebiotics, the probiotics. There's actually a new category called postbiotics that are really fascinating. But I think, when you look at probiotics, let's start there. Do you use a probiotic on a daily?
Yes, I'm not consistent with everything every day. And yes, I have a probiotic in my kitchen cabinet that I rotate and mix it up.
So probiotics are fascinating. I mean, just in the last 10 years, most people that I know are taking a probiotic, and most of them not consistently. I don't take one consistently either. But it's grown into this enormous category. In the dietary supplement industry, it's the number 3 category right now, behind multivitamins and fish oil. And so people want probiotics. And I think the idea of probiotics just rock, just in theory. But I don't think that the probiotics that are on the market really live up to the hype, unfortunately. Most people are consuming lactobacillus or bifidobacteria. They do reside in the gut, but in very small amounts. What you're taking is not colonizing in the gut. And so they're not working in the way that people think that they are working. Most probiotics, especially lactobacillus and bifido, they're dead in a pill. As a manufacturer, we know that you need to put in 10 times the amount just to meet the label claim. And so these things are easily inactivated by heat or any kind of pressure or temperature or, whatever it might be. They're very labile. They're very unstable. They're dead very easily. So when people are consuming these, they are mostly dead. If they are alive, you're probably not getting past the stomach acid, because that's how we've evolved as humans. We've evolved having this very low pH, so that whenever we consume bacteria or anything that's pathogenic, we kill it instantly and it doesn't get into the GI tract further. And so probiotics are the same. Most of them don't get past the stomach acid. So I will say though that probiotics, even though they're not alive, they're not colonizing, they're certainly not without benefit. They do work much like a vaccination, if you will, because when you have this shell of a bacteria that you're consuming, it incites an immune response within the GI tract. And that has this cascade effect in the body where it really shifts your immune system and shifts your inflammatory processes. And so it can be very positive overall. And this is known as a biological response modification, super technical term, but it just is that idea of these kind of dead, inactivated bacteria can have this strong biological response. So I can talk about probiotics all day, but they're incredible. And there are certain bacteria now I will mention just quickly. I'm a huge fan of spore probiotics. Yeah. I do think that those are far superior to versus what everybody else is taking. Yeah. And then we're starting to get the next gen like Akkermansia. So there's next level stuff coming in here that is very exciting.
Yeah. I've heard the Akkermansia by Pendulum supplements, and then Microbiome Labs started kind of the spore-based, Quran really educating everyone on spore-based probiotics. But I also I need to buy more of the ingredients to make it, but the Dr. William Davis's book, Super Gut, and making my own probiotic yogurt with coconut milk. And then you add L-reuteri, because he has a whole book on all the benefits of L-reuteri, and then you can customize, which I thought was pretty cool, which probiotics you add. So I'd empty the capsules and then you ferment it in the yogurt machine for 48 hours when you do coconut milk, 38 or 48 hours, but way longer than regular yogurt at a grocery store. It's fascinating how much longer you need to ferment it to get the live bacteria to multiply. Yeah. So it's a good source. So that's probiotics.
Yes.
That's gut bacteria. And then prebiotics, I always think of it as feeding fertilizer for the garden.
Totally.
What's the prebiotic and why do we need it? And, a lot of, we can supplements say they, have prebiotics and probiotics and stuff, but let's talk about prebiotics.
Yeah, it's important to tease out some of those ideas. A prebiotic, by definition, is any substrate that is selectively utilized by microorganisms in the gut. And it's not any one thing. It's not always fiber. By definition, it is any substrate. So we know that there's a whole spectrum of dietary components, fiber being one. Some other ones would be like polyphenols from, fruits and vegetables. Those can be selectively utilized as food for the microorganisms. And so most people are just consuming probiotics on a daily basis and crossing their fingers and hoping that it's shifting their gut microbiome or maintaining their gut microbiome. But you need to feed it. And so it's just like planting a tree and watering it on a daily basis. And so that is a prebiotic. I will say, I think that prebiotics might be more important than probiotics. The jury's still out, but there's a lot of really interesting research that's occurring right now in the area of prebiotics.
Would you be feeding the bad guys if you give probiotics and you have bad bacteria overgrowth? So if you're giving fiber, if you're trying to fertilize the bad guys, isn't that wrong?
Yeah. So we're now getting into specificity of prebiotics. And this is just what the conversation that's occurring right now, which is really interesting. So there are prebiotics that have low specificity. Some of the most common ones, unfortunately, have low specificity, meaning all the bacteria in the gut consume them, the good and the bad. And when they have low specificity, like the inulins, the FOS, the GOS, the XOS, some of the most common ones that people consume in a dietary supplement, you do get those off symptoms because, again, the bad guys are consuming them. They tend to create a lot of gas, a lot of metabolic byproducts because everybody's consuming them. And so oftentimes when people consume these low specificity prebiotics, they just create a lot of GI complaints. And so they're like, ooh, prebiotics are not for me. And a lot of the ones that are low specificity tend to be FODMAP unfriendly. So we know that the FODMAP are sugars. They're a group of fermentable sugars that certain people are very sensitive to and react very highly to. So some people, when they use inulin, as an example, will have just a violent reaction to it. And so there are non-FODMAP, low sensitivity type fibers that are better. But there's a whole spectrum of specificity. So if you go to the other end, right, there are these high specific prebiotics that only a subset of the bacteria in your gut can actually consume. So you're not getting a big bang for your buck because it's only a couple of the bacteria that are actually using them. And so what we're seeing right now is this rise of kind of, I'm going to say medium, kind of the Goldilocks principle, medium specificity, where you're feeding a good amount of the good ones and you're getting a good active dose of metabolites, as it were. And so you need these prebiotics in the diet, or a dietary supplement, because you need to feed the bacteria the right kind. When you don't feed the bacteria in your gut don't thrive. They need food just like we do. And so they will be eliminated and your super diverse microbiome will reduce down into very singular, almost like monocropping, where we move from, 700 species to 200 species over time because we're not feeding the full microbiome.
Okay. There's so many things there. So when you are, get the sun shining right on me now. When we are looking at nutritional therapy, we always say north to south. So, feeding the microbiome, but it's also go back to, what we're eating, when, why, how. But I find a lot of people, I guess, go back, like I always work backwards layer by layer, but what they are eating, but how If they're in the sympathetic, they're in the fight or flight when they're eating. So just kind of, yes, we can eat all this great food, whatever we talked about, what your metabolic type is or what's the best food for your body and your body type. But how we eat, chronic stress impacts everything. So if people are rushing and eating poorly, have bad eating, chewing habits, that's like beginning of it, I would think, to break the food down properly. And then when I test people using a GI stool test as a practitioner and health investigator, it's looking at the amount of people. Everyone's got H. pylori high levels. So that's going to impact your ability to even, get past the stomach because it's not acidic enough because of lack of stomach acid as we get older. And then there's the H. pylori impact. So do you have any thoughts on, working on this gut biome health, but working backwards because we seem to be in a chronic stress state and poor digestion habits. And then this other thing of H. pylori, which is probably a result of chronic stress and poor habits.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I love all of that. I think that, so when we're talking about the gut, generally we're talking about the colon. That's where most of the bacteria reside, and that's where fibers are fermented and create those byproducts that we've talked about. But there's also the upper GI tract, right? And it's all related. And what happens upstream impacts what happens downstream. Yeah. And so we're learning a lot about what's happening in the mouth, both from the microbiome perspective. We have thousands, if not millions, if not billions of bacteria that are in the mouth. And there's certain profiles that are better, and it directly impacts the heart, directly impacts the brain. And so oral care, intimately related to gut health. And so, there's a lot you can do beyond brushing and flossing, oil pulling and all of that. But yeah, from an Ayurvedic perspective, one of the things that I love is that they've created a whole ceremony around eating. And they really break it down. So as an example, you should only eat when your right nostril is open. And so you'll notice that your breathing shifts nostrils every 90 minutes. And you, like right now, if you just pay attention to your breath, you're only breathing through one side of your nose, and the body always shifts from left to right. And the Ayurvedic and the yogic philosophy says that the body is broken in two parts. The left side is the feminine side, it's the cooling side. The right side is the masculine, the heating side, the sun side. So you always want to eat when only the right nostril, that sun energy, is active in the body. And so don't force it. Of course, you can do alternating nostril breathing. You can force it, but I wouldn't recommend that. Listen to your body, make sure that it's ready, it's prepared for food. And when you have that sun energy, then you have that digestive fire, and you can break down food very effectively. But yeah, it all starts in the mouth. You've got to make sure that you are chewing properly. My 10-year-old daughter, I see her eat and she's mindless. And I'm always just like, just slow down. Like, will you please just chew? And she just won't. But so now I'm like, okay, let's start counting the number of chews per mouthful. Can you get up to 28? And let's just play a game. So it starts there. You got to give your body a chance. Otherwise, it has to do the work for you. And a lot of times, the bacteria have to do the work for you. Yeah. And so there's so much to unpack with what you, and I'm sure I answered just part of it. But one last thought is this idea of stress. And so that the gut-brain axis, we know that within the muscles of the gut is the enteric nervous system. It's millions of nerves. And they're connected via the vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, up to the brain. And so if your brain and your mind is stressed out or it doesn't feel safe, it's sending that message to your GI tract, and your GI tract is constricting. It's not going to absorb. It's not going to break down food. It's not going to secrete, the HCl and the different enzymes that you need to break down food in the way that you want. And so the brain and the GI tract are in constant communication. And so it's critically important when you eat to make sure that you are in a peaceful environment, that you're not reading, you're not on your phone, you're focusing on your meal, and you're just trying to be zen, so that you're creating that parasympathetic nervous response where the vagus nerve is communicating with the gut saying, okay, we're safe, and you can break down this food now.
Oh, yeah. So I always think of I think I coach for Ben Greenfield, so I learned a lot of stuff from him over the years. But the breathing, I think I got this from him, but before you start eating, stop, pause, and reset. Take 3 deep breaths in and out and try to feel that shift of just 1 minute of proper breath work before you eat. Just feel like, okay, now, because I find that especially if we eat lunch, dinner, we usually eat like at 2:00 in the afternoon, that we're in the workday. So what tendency is like, I got to get back to work. So you're eating in that fight or flight. And so you're going to have digestive issues. So I always like to bring this topic up because I think so many people, yes, I'm going to take some probiotics. Well, so my saying is you can't out supplement poor lifestyle habits. And that would be, I can't out supplement poor eating habits either. Yeah. And so even if you're eating all this good, nutrient dense, healthy food, if you're not digesting it properly and breaking it down and absorbing it into the gut, we're going to have all these problems. You can take all the supplements, probiotics you want, but let's work on simple steps first. Are you eating in the right parasympathetic digestive nervous state before you and chewing your food? Because I think simple habits like that, before people start going, taking all this stuff before they eat or after they eat, I think it's, that's why I would say what you eat, when, why, and how. That I think it's such a big reminder for people. Yeah, let's do this and get probiotics, but let's actually start working on what you're doing first and then supplement where we need to.
Yeah. But it all starts with diet too. And it's the core to everything in terms of creating health, creating the longest health span possible, the longest lifespan possible. It all starts with the diet. And of course, we get into blue zones and how people are eating in certain areas of the world and how they're living to the hundreds healthfully. Yeah. Like it is possible. And so it's really important to shift, again, to live exceptionally, to do things different than most people, but really just to create ceremonies around meals and to change your relationship with food in that moment is critically important. I personally am a big fan of doing like apple cider vinegar before eating, 15 to 30 minutes, you just sip on 1 to 2 ounces. And it just stimulates your digestive tract. It increases your digestive fire and it prepares the body for food. I will tell most of my friends and family, I see them gulping down ice water and I'm like, whoa, from an Ayurvedic perspective, you're dousing the fire. You're putting out your digestive fire when you do that. Like it's fine to sip when you're eating a meal, but when you eat, like just don't drink. And that's critically important. I think I see people always drinking during, and I'm like, you're yeah. And so it can be somewhat hard to create new patterns around that.
Yes.
And one last little thing from an Ayurvedic perspective that I think is endlessly fascinating is, again, they get down to the energy quality of everything. And they get down to the different tastes that are in food: salty, sweet, pungent, bitter. Ayurveda recommends eating dessert before a meal. So if you're going to eat sweet, it should always be the first thing that you eat. And so you consume the sweet taste first. So if you eat a whole meal and then you have dessert or you do something sweet at the end of the meal, all of that digestive process has to go back to the start to break down sweet. And so how you eat these different tastes impacts how you break things down and how you digest foods. And so if you can try to do something sweet first, it actually will improve your digestive process overall, and avoid dessert for that reason.
But even with the apple cider vinegar, because it's more bitter, right?
Yep.
So then you have bitter, then sweet, response. And then
right. The bitter response gives you that activity,
enzymes,
what you want. And so people are like, oh, I use apple cider vinegar in a capsule or I use it in a gummy. I'm like, it's not even working. It's not doing anything for you. It all starts in the mouth.
Yes.
And that's what activates
receptors.
All of that. Totally. And so you need that bitter. And so, you don't want to do have a shot and then start eating. And you need to gap it. So just kind of awaken your digestive tract first, and then you can start eating. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to be that one drinking 5 glasses of water at dinner. And then my food, I just felt like I was TMI, but throw up because it wasn't moving south. It was just like, okay, I can't go down anywhere. I'm just going to come back up. And so I had to really always remind myself, especially if you eat out at a restaurant, they come by and fill your glass up. It's like, okay, no more. I got to just put that glass away, or just don't put it at your dinner table. Just have it before with your apple cider vinegar and then come back to it.
Yeah,
so
I hear.
I know we were supposed to get into, I want to talk about zombie cells, because I actually heard it on the TV news here the other day. It was amazing. But zombie cells and optimizing aging and symbiotics. Before I say that, I just want to finish up our conversation, and then we'll wrap it up with this last little bit. HRV testing. When we go back to talking about the gut-brain connection, heart rate variability testing, is that something you find beneficial if they're wearing a heart rate strap versus an Aura and a Whoop ring is not accurate, but like Hanu Health and different companies, or my friend Sweet Beat Life, I did for 15 years, using the chest strap and getting real time. Is that helpful to know gut-brain connection or to measure HRV?
I've spoken with a lot of practitioners that believe in that. And it's like the end all and be all. I personally, I think it's an important measure. And I think people focus on it maybe a little too much. I know for me personally, the numbers never correlate. And I've talked with my team that are, they're all biohackers. They're measuring everything on a daily basis. And a lot of them have come to that same conclusion, using Aura rings and looking at such. So I haven't seen a direct correlation in the way that I would want. And when you get into the science, it doesn't seem to be as critical as a lot of people want it to be. I know we, as a company, Neurohacker, we've looked at using that as a measure for testing out one of our sleep products. But our science team ultimately said, it's just HRV is not a reliable measure. So it's kind of meaningless for that purpose. With that said, I certainly think there is some value. It's hard to make these broad statements about what number you should be at, and so I think but it is good to know yourself, to know where your numbers are and where your baseline is, which again, very different than my baseline. And you can watch it go up and down based upon what's happening on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. N=1 experiment. So I love talking about Ayurvedic medicine. I've always wanted to do a show on that. So sorry, I got off tangent to talk about, the symbiotics and zombie cells. As I said, we talk about senescent cells. So we have like less than 10 minutes. What would you want to make sure athletes know about how to improve their gut health, to improve longevity, and where we can fit in supplements when appropriate for the aging process? Because athletes, I'll say, fit and active people, I'm trying to give all this information for the people that aren't metabolic disease. They are fit and active already. So a lot of times they think they're invincible and they don't need to do anything. But I think exercise is a stress, and doing long distance endurance stress is a lot of stress in your body. So I'll let you say what you'd like on that topic of symbiotics and how Neurohacker can maybe help us improve the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most people in the modern world need to do something. And again, I think that digestive health is the core to everything in terms of our health measures as we age. And so it is important that you do something. And obviously, I think refining your diet, critically important. Looking at, especially what foods work for you, figuring that out, critically important, whether that's a food allergy elimination challenge diet, whether that's, fasting on occasion, whether that's just eating more plant-based. It really depends on the person. Mm-hmm. But I will say, given where we're at right now as a society, I think it is important that we're doing dietary supplementation. And especially when it gets into prebiotics, as I mentioned, I think that that's becoming more important than probiotics. You got to feed the bacteria, especially the right kind of bacteria. And most people aren't getting the right variety or diversity of prebiotics that they want or need. One example of this is resistant starches. There's a lot of conversation right now around resistant starches. They are, for all intents and purposes, an ancestral fiber that has just become void from the standard American diet. We just don't consume them on a daily basis. And so because of that, these bacteria then that rely on resistant starches that we've co-evolved with, they're not thriving. And so we're reducing them in the gut. And so, I look at the microbiome as an organ, and in a lot of ways, as we age, it becomes a failing organ. And so diversity in diet, as well as diversity in prebiotics, is critically important to maintain diversity within the GI tract. And so that is the goal, diversity within the GI tract. There's a lot of different ways to get there. There's a lot of probiotics. We didn't talk about postbiotics. I mentioned it briefly as dead bacteria, but there's some very interesting things that can be done on that front. At the most basic level, one recommendation that I'll just leave with listeners is increasing polyphenols in the diet. Polyphenols have a prebiotic-like effect, and there's certain ways to do it. From an Ayurvedic perspective, the number one polyphenol supplement is called triphala, and triphala, some people say. Tri means 3 and phala means fruit. And if you work with any Ayurvedic practitioner, you will probably lead with a script or a bottle of triphala in your hands, because it's considered the panacea. It really just creates balance in the GI tract, but it's rich in these polyphenol compounds. And we're just now learning that this 5,000-year-old remedy that works very well, we now know in part that it works through polyphenols. So highly recommend exploring that as an ingredient and as a supplement. It's traditionally used before you go to bed at night. And I will say start slow. Usually about 500 milligrams works very well. And you'll notice it's working if you wake up and have a bowel movement first thing. You'll often need to bump that up to about 1,000 milligrams at night. But just find the dose that works for you. Find the right schedule that works for you. But it's just an easy way to introduce polyphenols into the diet.
Yeah, I think a lot of listeners are getting confused of listening to different food advocates of having any plants at all. So a lot of people are eliminating plants because of plant toxin fear and not having fiber. And, everyone's kind of confused. What should I do? And it's all about gut health and what the gut needs. But there's, different arguments of I can get that benefits of gut health just on an animal-based diet, that I don't need to do all this. But I think people get confused that, okay, I'm just not going to eat any plants at all because I'm scared of them now because they're going to cause a toxic reaction. So there's just so much different sides out there. People are overwhelmed, I think.
Yeah, it's so complicated. And, it's great that we have a lot of information, but you really need to tease through it and figure out what's real and what's not. And so that's why it is good for individuals to work with practitioners that really understand the depth of this. And you can do research online on Google and find something that is interesting that you can try. But it's a crapshoot. And so, that's why I come back to Ayurveda, because it's, again, 5,000 years old, and it just works. I've personally seen it work. I've used it clinically. I would say that's the gold standard from my standpoint in terms of how to eat for health and longevity. And, again, the bacteria in your gut, they can use protein. To some extent, they ferment some of the proteins to create those important metabolites, the short chain fatty acids that we talked about. But ultimately, the bacteria in your gut really rely on carbohydrates and fibers and polyphenols to create food. And so we know that, the genome of the microbiome far outweighs our own genome on a scale of 100 to 1. So the amount of genes that are in the human body are far outweighed by the microbiome. And so there's a lot of functional benefits that we rely on from the microbiome based upon what we eat. And so if we're not feeding those, we're losing part of that organ and part of the functional benefits that we need from the microgenome as it is.
Yeah. So not just eating a stick of butter to get our butyrate production up. So
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm all for it. Butyrate in the diet is fantastic. That's why I love ghee. Ghee is clarified butter from the Ayurvedic tradition, and it is the highest source of butyrate. And again, gets right into the colon and feeds the colon sites. Great.
All right. So I know we're out of time, and I love all this information. So if people want to learn more about Neurohacker Collection, and if there's great blogs on the zombie cells, I'll put link to, because we didn't even get to that.
You can get to that. Yes.
There's so much to dive into, but Qualia Mind is what we know. I know Ben Greenfield back in the day was always, that's when we talk about brain health, Qualia Mind, but they have different products and kind of more as you're talking about working on the gut health. So is there a place for people to get started if we send them to the websites, Neurohacker Collective or neurohacker.com, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, neurohacker.com. Neurohacker.com is our landing page. We are an education first company. And so there is a wealth of information on there. We have some really cool products as well. We have monographs for all of the ingredients that we, as a science team, have written that are fantastic. We do have a podcast called Collective Insights, where we bring on some of the biggest minds in the world of health and wellness, and have some really interesting conversations there. We're on all the social media outlets as well. So yeah, our flagship is Qualia Mind. That was the product really that started it all. And that still is our flagship today. It's a nootropic product, but we have a wide variety of products, including Qualia Symbiotic, which has some really interesting gut health ingredients. And I love the way that it's formulated. It's a pre, pro, post with ferment foods, digestive enzymes. It's a good add-on to anybody's diet, low FODMAP. So you don't have that sensitivity if you're sensitive to prebiotics. And then we have a whole wealth of longevity tools there. And one of them is the zombie killing product called Qualia Senolytic. And that is a whole nother area that I would love to dive into, but it's a deep dive. But cellular senescence is one of the things that drives aging. And so this product is designed to undercut that whole process and to help the body eliminate these zombie cells.
Well, definitely need a part 2 on that, because I just feel the need, especially watching my parents and my mom now. And as I said, all their friends, I was there last week in Palm Desert, and I go work out at the gym at the clubhouse, and I just am fascinated watching people when they're 70 plus years old and going, okay, that is so much of stuff we can control, and the choices we make now. So when we are 70, 89 years old, we are kicking ass and not struggling to get up out of a chair. So I would love to dive into that if you can. But I know we have a discount code, LowCarb15, for our listeners to get 15% off. Check it out. I know there's great, as I said, great blogs on there. And even, if there's anything on fasting, because I keep talking about fasting for gut health in the past, but just how different it is for athletes would be another topic, because we're looking at cell autophagy through exercise and even coffee versus athletes we're fasting way too much and having low energy availability and not eating because we're fasting and exercising 1 to 3 times a day. So another topic to dive into future episode.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, thanks, Nick. Have a great Friday and stay cool in our little heat wave we're having in Southern California.
Awesome. This was so much fun. Let's do it again.
All right. Thanks.
Hey, my fellow aging endurance athletes, just a reminder, if you like what you listened to today, make sure to share this episode with your community. Head to debbiepotts.net to set up a free discovery call to learn more about my personalized coaching programs, especially if you are on a mission as myself to improve the aging process and start training to be my best self when I am 80, 90 years old. So I am on a mission to live my best life and be my best self the second half of my life. So if you're on the same mission as me, head over to my website and YouTube channel to learn more ways to improve the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method.
Before I say goodbye, make sure you head to neurohacker.com and use our code LOWCARB15 for 15% off and see how you like adding these supplements into your protocol. Remember, you can't out-supplement poor lifestyle habits, as I always say, and you can't out-exercise poor nutrition habits. So we need to work on what we eat, how, when, why, where. Proper digestion, of course, is key to good.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.